Tennessee football is fun again. They're one of my favorite teams to watch in college football, and I feel like when Tennessee football is good, college football is just more fun to watch in general. After a very up and down past few decades in Rocky Top, it seems the Volunteers have finally found their coach, they have a superstar quarterback, they've gotten their swagger back, and they have an opportunity to potentially win the SEC this year. They have a ton of great matchups coming up, the team is fun, they're putting up numbers, and they're winning games. In today's video, I want to talk about the rise of Tennessee football, talk about how this team and how this offense has gotten so much fun to watch, my expectations for the season moving forward, and what we can expect from Tennessee football for years to come. But before we get into it, nearly 80% of you guys are not subscribed to the channel, so quickly be sure to hit the subscribe button, leave a like if you want to support the channel, turn on notifications so you never miss when I upload, and let me know what player or topic I should cover in my next video. Now, let's talk about Tennessee football. In 1998, the Volunteers obviously won a national championship under Philip Fulmer, but ever since then, the program went on a steady downhill. They ranked size number 4 in 2001, number 13 in 2004, and number 12 in 2007. Philip Fulmer was there for a long time, and he was a very successful coach, but they eventually decided they would need to go in a new direction and would hire Lane Kiffin in 2009. Kiffin brought the Volunteers to a 7-6 record, and he'd end up leaving to take the USC job. To start out the 2010s, they hired a coach by the name of Derek Dooley. He was the son of a former legendary Georgia coach, and Derek was supposed to come in and keep the Tennessee program alive. In year 1, he went 6-7, where they ended up losing in the Music City Bowl. Unfortunately, things did not get any better from there, as he posted back-to-back 5-7 campaigns with 1-7 records in the SEC. Derek Dooley was eventually run out of town, and in came the savior of the program, Butch Jones. He had gotten his start at Central Michigan before he took over the Cincinnati program, and was then hired to be the head coach at Tennessee. Butch Jones was a good recruiter, someone who had won wherever he was at, and many expected the Volunteers to get back to their former glory under Jones. The first-year Volunteers squad featured guys such as Justin Worley, Rajon Neal, Marquez North, and Alexander Johnson, and they'd end up finishing with a 5-7 record. This didn't really matter though, because Jones was recruiting at a high level, and he had some guys who were going to break out in the future. In 2014, the team went 7-6 before a breakout 2015 campaign. If it weren't for a late, heartbreaking comeback by the hands of Baker Mayfield in Oklahoma, the Volunteers would have won 10 games. They ended up going 9-4 with a 5-3 record in the conference, and this is when we saw the emergence of Josh Dobbs, Jalen Hurd, and Josh Malone. Because of how they finished the 2015 season, the Volunteers went into the 2016 season with college football playoff hopes, led by star quarterback Josh Dobbs, star running back Jalen Hurd, all-purpose player Alvin Kamara, star defensive end Derek Barnett, and star receiver Josh Malone. The Volunteers began the season ranked number 9 in the country. They would struggle to take care of Appalachian State in a Week 1 Thursday night game before they would play in front of the largest crowd in college football history against Virginia Tech in Week 2. They win both of those games. Then after a win over Ohio, they were matched up with number 19 Florida. Josh Dobbs led the Volunteers on a comeback as they beat the Gators 38-28. Then the following weekend, they had a date with Georgia. This was the first year under Kirby Smart, and on the road against number 25 Bulldogs, Josh Dobbs had his famous Hail Mary completion to Juwan Jennings, and they got out of there with a 34-31 victory, and were now ranked number 9 for a showdown with number 8 Texas A&M. Despite a couple of miracles late, they ended up losing to the Aggies in double overtime, which would trigger a 3-game losing streak, followed by Alabama and a close loss to South Carolina. All of a sudden, Tennessee's playoff and SEC hopes had gone down the drain, but after wins over Tennessee Tech, Kentucky, and Missouri, a 10-win season was still possible. Unfortunately, once they got back into the polls, they lost to Vanderbilt in their final game before they beat Nebraska in the Music City Bowl to go 9-4, matching the 2015 season. Going into 2017, they'd have to replace Kamara, Barnett, Dobbs, and Hurd, and this was a struggle. Both Quentin Dormady and Jarrett Guarantano split time at quarterback, John Kelly became the main running back, and Marquez Callaway was the leading receiver. The team would start ranked number 25 in the country, but after surviving in double overtime against Georgia Tech and beating Indiana State, lose by way of a Hail Mary to Florida, and this triggered a lot of losing. They lost their next 7 SEC games, and their offense was putrid. They got wins over UMass and Southern Miss, and this got them to a 4-8 record, and Butch Jones was fired, and Brady Hoke took over as the interim guy. In 2018, Jeremy Pruitt came in from Alabama, and many expected Pruitt to be the guy to take him over the top. Unfortunately, year 1 under Pruitt did not go as expected, as the team went 5-7. 2019 was supposed to be their big year, but in Week 1, they lost to Georgia State, and then suffered a heartbreaking overtime loss to BYU in Week 2. Despite that, the team got it together and ended up going 8-5 with a win over Indiana in the Gator Bowl. This was huge, and that is why Tennessee had a lot of hype in 2020. Unfortunately, Jarrett Guarantano, off-the-field antics, and just overall team dysfunction ended up dooming Tennessee to a 3-7 record, and then combining that with all the stuff that went on behind the scenes with recruiting, Jeremy Pruitt was fired. Going into 2021, as new athletic director Danny White decided he wanted to get his guy from UCF, Josh Heupel. He'd gotten his start at Oklahoma before he coached up Drew Lock at Missouri and eventually took over for Scott Frost at UCF. In year one, Heupel ended up playing Joe Milton the first couple weeks, but once he got hurt, Hendon Hooker came in and set the world on fire. He put up touchdowns, won games, and led them to a 7-6 record. They ended up losing in the Music City Bowl, and the only game that wasn't close all year was the Georgia game. Tennessee football had a good offense, they were competitive, and many were excited to see what they would do this year. Somehow though, they would not end up starting the season ranked, which didn't make sense in my eyes, but so far, Tennessee has put all of that to rest and has proven why they are legit. The quarterback, you obviously have Hooker, and so far he has 1,193 yards with 8 touchdowns and doesn't have a single interception. He's completing nearly 72% of his passes, and he's currently a top 3 Heisman contender according to most sources. At running back, it sorta has been a committee approach, as Jalen Wright, Jabari Small, Dylan Sampson, and Hooker have all gotten time there, and they have combined for 14 touchdowns on the ground. The Volunteers brought back their top receiver Cedric Tillman, and while he has been alright, he's not really gotten going yet. Jalen Hyatt has stepped up in his place, and he has 23 catches for 325 yards and 3 touchdowns, and then former 5-star USC transfer Bru McCoy has also played well. Former 2019 blue chip Ramel Keaton has started to make plays, and both Jacob Warren and Princeton Fant are solid options in the tight end game. The defense is what a lot of people were worried about, but so far, besides a banged up secondary, I think Tennessee's in good shape there. So, with all these good stats and players, how have they done? Well, in week 1 they played against Ball State, and that game was over before the first quarter. They ended up beating the Cardinals 59-10, and this would put them into the polls at number 24. In week 2, they'd have a rematch against Pittsburgh, who they lost to last year, but this time they'd have to go on the road. In what was one of the most thrilling games of the year so far, Tennessee ended up beating the number 17 Panthers in overtime and got a huge win. In week 3, they'd go home for a tune-up game against Akron, before College game day would come for their matchup at Florida. Over the last few decades, even the best Tennessee teams always seemed to lose to Florida, and it was always heartbreak after heartbreak. This year, it was different though. The number 20 Gators were led by Anthony Richardson at quarterback, and despite leading by multiple touchdowns in the fourth quarter, Tennessee started to fall apart and even gave up an onside kick, which would give Florida a chance to win. Thankfully, he'd be hit as he threw, and Kamal Haddon would pick that ball off, and Tennessee would win a 38-33 victory over the Gators. They're now 4-0 and ranked number 8 in the country. This past weekend they were on bye, but now they have to travel to number 25 LSU. Despite this game being on the road against a ranked SEC team, the Volunteers are actually favored. This will be an extremely tough game for them, but I'm confident that Tennessee's going to pull this one out. The experience and confidence of the offense and defense does not have me too worried, and I think Tennessee wins this game in close fashion. After that, though, they might have one of the biggest games at Tennessee of the entire century. More than likely, number 1 Alabama will come to town, and if Tennessee is 5-0 going into that, this game could be the game that puts Tennessee's program back on the map and puts them in the college football playoff discussion. I'm not going to say the Volunteers are going to upset the Tide, but I think if they've ever had a chance to do it, it's going to be this year. Hendon Hooker is playing at a Heisman level. This team is extremely confident and experienced, and that home fan base is going to be insane. After that, they play UT Martin before games against both Kentucky and Georgia, who are both top 25 teams right now. Both of those games will be very difficult, but Tennessee has an opportunity to win both of them. To finish the year, they play Missouri, South Carolina, and Vanderbilt, and those are the 3 worst teams in the SEC East right now. Because I don't think Tennessee is a perfect team, I think they're going to end up going 10-2, and I think they're going to lose 2 out of the 4 of LSU, Bama, Kentucky, and Georgia. I'm not quite sure which one that'll be, but either way, this will be an extremely successful season for Tennessee, and it'll rejuvenate the fan base even more. It's going to make Josh Heupel one of the top young coaches in the country, and they'll once again be hyped up for next year. They're more than likely going to return all 3 of their running backs, bring back both Jalen Hyatt and Bru McCoy, and then they'll add in a decent recruiting class. Right now, the Volunteers have the number 9 class for 2023, and there are a couple of guys who really catch my eye. The first 2 are both top 100 edge rushers in Shandavian Bradley and Caleb Herring. In order to win in the SEC, you need both a dominant offensive and defensive line, and having 2 top 10 pass rushers is going to help them a lot. You also cannot forget the iconic offensive lineman in Shamarud Umarov, who's a 6'7" offensive tackle who will be a key member on that offensive line moving forward. Then there's the obvious one, and that is Nico Lamalieva. It was rumored that Tennessee paid him $9 million in NIL money, but that's just a rumor. The 6'5" quarterback is from the state of California, and he's currently the number 4 player overall in the class, and the number 3 quarterback behind Arch Manning and Malachi Nelson. Getting an elite quarterback like this is huge for Josh Heupel, and with what he's done with Hendon Hooker, I'm sure he'll do a tremendous job with Nico. But will Nico even be the starter? That's one of the questions I currently have, as there's a chance Tennessee could bring in a transfer, and they have a redshirt freshman on the roster by the name of Taven Jackson. He's a 4-star from the class of 2022, and currently he's gotten a couple chances to play. Taven definitely has a high ceiling as a quarterback, and in my opinion, there's going to end up being a three-man quarterback battle between him, Nico, and some sort of potential transfer. I don't know what quarterback is not going to want to transfer into Heupel's offense. Either way, I think Tennessee will continue to have an explosive offense moving forwards. They're building on both the offensive and defensive line, have some good skill players returning, have momentum, and they have a good coach. Tennessee football is on the rise, and hopefully they will be here for good. I'd love to see them battling for SEC titles once again, and as a soft-spoken fan of the Vols, I am very pumped for their future. But what do you think? If you're a Tennessee fan, what do you think of the direction of the program? How do you think this season will go? And what are your expectations moving forward? Be sure to let me know down below. Leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know another player, topic, or situation I could cover next, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.